It's 2:17 a.m. The hallway camera outside the parking garage blinks once, twice, like it's struggling to stay awake. A man steps into frame, shoulders hunched, phone pressed to his ear. You can't hear what he's saying, but you can see his free hand shaking, the way his breath fogs the cold lens. He pauses beneath the light, glances straight up at the camera like he knows it's there, like he wants to be seen. Then the feed stutters. 3 seconds of static. When the picture comes back, the hallway is empty. No footsteps, no shadow retreating. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the feeling that something important just slipped past without leaving footprints. Earlier that night, a voicemail lands on a phone that never gets answered. The message is short, a single breath, then a voice that sounds older than it should. If anything happens to me, please don't let them clean this up. The voicemail cuts off mid-sentence, like the rest of the words were pulled out of the air. The phone keeps ringing afterward, vibrating against a desk, lighting up the room with each missed call. Whoever left that message doesn't try again, and by morning, the man from the hallway camera will be reported dead. He'd been living with a kind of quiet tension that follows people who know too much. The kind that sits behind your eyes and tightens your jaw even when you're trying to smile at strangers. People around him noticed it before anything else. How he started checking the street before stepping out of his building. How he kept his curtains half closed even in the afternoon. How he'd lower his voice when the conversation drifted into money, contracts, or names that carried weight. He told one friend that the city had changed for him, that the streets felt narrower, like the walls were leaning in. The money had changed things too. A contract worth $119 million doesn't just change your bank balance, it changes how people look at you. It changes who starts returning your calls. It changes the room when you walk into it. Suddenly, you're not just a person, you're a doorway. He joked about it at first, said it felt like everyone wanted to borrow his shadow. But the jokes thinned out as the weeks passed. Somewhere along the line, the laughter got replaced with long silences and glances over his shoulder, as if he could hear footsteps that weren't there at the beginning. The deal was supposed to be simple. Paperwork, signatures, meetings that smelled like cheap coffee and expensive promises. The kind of room where everyone shakes hands a little too hard and smiles a little too wide. He told himself this was how things worked, that big money came with big egos, and you survived by nodding along. But then he started noticing the numbers didn't line up. Figures shifting, names appearing where they shouldn't. The contract felt heavier in his hands every time he flipped through the pages, like the paper itself knew it was carrying something dirty. He started keeping copies, not just of documents, but of moments. A quick voice note after a meeting, a blurry photo of a signature that didn't belong, a list of names scribbled on the back of a receipt, folded into his wallet. He didn't trust the office computers, didn't trust the cloud. He trusted his pockets more. And every night, when he emptied them onto his desk, he felt the weight of what he was collecting. Proof has a gravity to it. The more you gather, the harder it pulls you down. The first warning came quietly. A stranger in the parking lot who smiled like they'd known each other for years, asked how business was going, then walked away without waiting for an answer. A car that idled outside his building for too long, engine humming like it was breathing. A call from an unknown number that dropped the moment he said hello. None of it was enough to call the police. All of it was enough to make sleep feel unsafe. He started leaving the TV on at night, not to watch it, but to break the silence that made every sound feel like a threat. When he finally decided to speak up, it wasn't dramatic. No big speech, no public scene. It was a quiet meeting in a corner office with blinds half drawn, where the light cut his face into sharp lines. He slid the folder across the desk and said, "This isn't right." The person on the other side didn't look surprised. They didn't even open the folder at first. They just leaned back, studied his face, and asked him if he understood how dangerous misunderstandings could be. The word misunderstandings landed heavy in the room, like it was meant to mean something else. After that meeting, things sped up in strange ways. Calls he expected didn't come. Calls he didn't expect came in clusters, back to back, from numbers he didn't recognize. He started walking longer routes home, doubling back on himself, watching reflections in shop windows instead of the street ahead. He told a family member he was thinking about leaving town for a while, just to breathe somewhere the air didn't feel charged. The family member laughed it off, told him he was being paranoid. He smiled back, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. The night he died, he'd changed his routine, left later than usual, took the stairs instead of the elevator. The building's hallway camera caught him at 2:17 a.m., phone to his ear, lips moving fast. Investigators would later say there was no sign of a struggle in the hallway. No raised voices, no shadows following him. Just a man stepping into a blind spot the camera couldn't see. Whatever happened next happened where the lens went dark. By the time security found him, the story had already started to form around his body, neat and easy, like it had been waiting for a place to land. The official version moved quickly. Wrong place, wrong time, a random act. The kind of explanation that wraps things up before anyone has a chance to pull at loose threads. But people who knew him felt the gap between the story and the man they'd watched grow smaller in on himself. They remembered the way he'd started pausing mid-sentence, like he was weighing whether the words were safe to say out loud. They remembered the folder he never let out of his sight. They remembered the voicemail he left, the one that begged someone not to let this be cleaned up. For a while, the evidence he'd gathered seemed to disappear into the same silence that swallowed him. The office said they couldn't find the files. The devices were wiped. The copies were gone. It was like the proof had never existed. People whispered that he'd been careless, that he'd exaggerated what he thought he saw. The contract continued to move forward, signatures stacking on top of signatures, money flowing where it was supposed to flow. Life, on the surface, smoothed itself out. Then, months later, something small surfaced. A flash drive tucked into the lining of an old jacket that had been hanging untouched in a closet. Inside it, audio clips, half-recorded meetings, names spoken in low voices, laughter where there shouldn't have been laughter. The files weren't complete, but they were enough to crack open the neat story that had been told about his death. Enough to suggest that the misunderstanding he'd been warned about was actually a map, and he'd followed it straight into a dead end. The twist didn't come with sirens or headlines. It came with quiet confirmations, one by one, as people who had stayed silent started to recognize their own voices in those recordings. Deals were traced. Timelines overlapped in ways they weren't supposed to. The contract wasn't just inflated, it was a funnel. Moving public money into private pockets, protected by people whose job it was to look the other way. And the man who stepped into the camera's blind spot had been trying to jam his foot in the door before it slammed shut. By the time the full picture came into focus, it was already too late for him. He hadn't been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He'd been in the exact place his choices led him. The voicemail wasn't fear, it was a final handoff. A way of pushing the truth forward when he knew he couldn't carry it anymore. The hallway camera didn't miss the moment by accident. The blind spot had been chosen long before he walked into it. A small pocket of darkness, waiting for a body to fill it. There's a strange quiet that settles over places where the truth finally surfaces. Not relief, not closure. Just the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the feeling that the room is still holding its breath. The contract, the money, the names, they all exist out there now, stripped of their shadows. But the man who tried to drag them into the light doesn't. The hallway camera still blinks on and off every night, recording nothing but empty space, as if it's waiting for someone else to step into the dark and remind us how easy it is to disappear.